I did not look at the eclipse. Well, didn't really work out for the eclipse. There's a huge cloud, so that was a little disappointing. But we did see it get dim, so it was kind of cool to see, sunset at what 2 p.m. So that was kind of neat, but a little underwhelming there. We did get the bank vault installed, so we're ready to go for the tornadoes. So and the crew was puzzled on how to get it in there. See, because they needed a boom truck and they had to unload it. I said, guys, if you just let me know ahead of time what space you need, I could have made this work. But
we could have moved it because they took 3 of my dogs.
Yeah, we had to take some trees down. But they appreciated the overtime. So okay, guys. So we're all good. Glad to be back. We're going to finish up our study on the Baptist Faith and Message probably next week. So Lord willing, we'll get through Peace and War and Religious Liberty today. And then we'll cover the family next week. And I'm going to add on an additional section of things not covered by the Southern Baptist Faith and Message. And then we'll have about 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how long we go, for an additional study before our summer break. So if you have any ideas, thoughts, let me know, because I'm still preparing for that. So you have your opportunity to get what you want in. All right. So let's start with Peace and War. This is Article 16, and we'll read it and then we'll go through it. It says, "It is the duty of Christians to seek peace with all men on principles of righteousness. In accordance with the spirit and teachings of Christ, they should do all in their power to put an end to war. The true remedy for the war spirit is the gospel of our Lord. The supreme need of the world is the acceptance of his teachings in the affairs of men and nations, and the practical application of his law of love. Christian people throughout the world should pray for the reign of the Prince of Peace." Fairly straightforward. Christians don't support war. We should put an end to war with everything in our power to do so. Now, that said, our Southern Baptist Convention has a couple different wings to it, right? We've got the missions wing, right? And we've got the executive committee, which kind of just, overhead keeps things running, arranges the conference and all that. But there's also an Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission, the ERLC, as sometimes it's known. And that is like what do I want to call it? Not the political wing, but they do delve in politics a lot. I would call it more of the, campaigning wing. Trying to get Christian values and viewpoints seen by the government. And so, they're talking with congressmen, right, all this stuff. Of all the 3 wings, right, that one probably gets the most flack, right? At the same time, it's probably the most visible, right, especially to our congressmen. And they sent this week, or maybe it was last week, they sent a letter from the ERLC representing the Southern Baptist stating their support for a House bill to give more aid to the Ukraine. And you've probably seen this in the news. That passed yesterday, day before yesterday. And so the ERLC supported that. Now, you look at this, Peace and War, and you know that the ERLC wanted more aid for the Ukraine. How does that fit together? How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Should we not have voted on that? Each individual church or whatever.
Well, we're locally autonomous. How are we vote? You could say, in a general sense, right? The Southern Baptists had their annual convention. There were messengers sent. Come on in. There were messengers sent, and we elected those people in the ERLC, and there has been some leadership changes. So just like any other representative government agency, right? Vote on everything, but maybe we should have. Any other thoughts? So on one hand, we've got the ERLC gaining, or a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, stating their support for the United States to give aid to the Ukraine, which they're in a war, right? If you under a rock somewhere, aid mean, right? They're going to buy weapons, ammo, munitions, whatever. On the other hand, we've got this Section 16 of Peace and War that says we should seek peace with all men on principles of righteousness, and we should do all in our power to put an end to war. Now, I bring it up to you, my fellow Southern Baptists and friends. How do you square that circle?
Well, they're still doing all in their power to put the war to end because the greatest power wins. It's not going to resolve itself. If they keep fighting back and forth, there's no supreme power.
Okay. So you're saying to put an end to war, one way is to win the war.
Right.
Okay.
For another one to start.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
It's easier to see with Israel than Ukraine because Israel is just doing all in its power to not have to fight. And when it does fight, it does all in its power to save innocent lives.
Okay.
But in Ukraine and Russia, it's just every man throw what you got.
Okay. So we're okay so we would be more willing to support one type of war versus another type of war? Is that what you're suggesting, Carol?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But it's easier to reconcile in my mind when you've got somebody who's trying their best to just fight the true enemy.
Okay.
It's the one faction that's over there. But they're also surrounded by enemies on every side.
Mm-hmm.
And the good Lord and their Iron Dome are doing a good job of protecting the land of Israel
Okay.
for the best part. But it's just, I don't know. That one's easier for me to reconcile because they are trying to be diligent and not just taking innocent life.
Okay. So we would, if a war is being fought, I'll use the word justly, that is easier to stomach than just what we'll call total war, for example.
For me.
Okay, for you. Fair enough.
But on the other hand, Ukraine was invaded by Russia, and Russia's trying to take them over. So you can kind of use the same analogy that Ukraine's just trying to protect themselves.
Okay. So
it's kind of the same analogy.
okay. I like it.
Wasn't Ukraine doing some, or not Ukraine? Zelensky, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
President Zelensky of
Wasn't
Ukraine.
he doing bad things on the, to some of the people?
Aren't they all doing bad things
Yeah,
to
they
some
all
of the people?
doing bad things. So
I don't want to get political in this, but
Well,
the thing with Ukraine.
We're in the middle of it.
Yeah, I know. The thing
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Ukraine, and I don't care for Ukraine, and I don't care for Russia. But if you look at it strategically, Russia's actually doing us a favor. Because they
I
went
agree
in
with
there
David.
and they took out all the bio labs that was making all that vaccine garbage and all that other mess that they were making. They got rid of those. They exposed the money laundering hub of the deep state. So,
Okay.
you can look at it.
So in this room, we have several different opinions, right? And we're all, I'll call Southern Baptists, let's say. Now,
it's getting
what
hot in here.
what I'm getting at,
It was hot in here before.
hey, this is where the rubber hits the road, right?
I
This
think
is it.
When you got this going on, you've got Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and we all know God supports Israel. He says that those who bless Israel will be blessed.
So you got a war going on, but you've got some of the most intelligent people there in Israel that you're going to ever have. But we've got Iran supporting all of these terrorists that's in there. Well, you've got Ukraine over there that is nothing, like he said, with all this bio mess they've been going through and fighting Russia. That is their own war, as far as I'm concerned.
So,
And
okay.
we have more at stake in Israel with our people being in hostage, and what happened in them and provoked them into war. But what happened is really a nuisance. I mean, it is for every human being would not want to be invaded and lives be
Okay.
taken.
So we're getting down to the
So
nitty gritty
it's,
here, right? So
Mhm.
what we're trying to get at is at what point is war justified, right? Is it
When it comes
is
to
it ever justified? So if we're going to say no, which a lot of Christians do, right? You would be pacifist, right? And there are huge sects of Christianity that are pacifists. Quakers, Amish, the different sects of Baptists, purely pacifist, right?
Have any of
And-
you read the Old Testament?
Well,
yeah.
there's a but that said, just because it's in the Old Testament doesn't mean it's God's plan, right? He talks about basically tolerated divorce,
For so long,
right?
yeah.
Right? But when we look at the words of Jesus, what does he say? He says, turn the other cheek, right? He says, blessed are the peacemakers, right? And we can look, if you look at, right, it'll go into it, right? So there's whole sects of Christianity that are purely pacifist, no war at all.
Well, I'm gonna give a comment. It says that that we should be doing everything to end war,
Mm-hmm.
and I can cite you examples of World War II,
Okay.
World War I, Korea, Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
today.
Yeah.
To me, the way you maintain peace is through power.
Okay.
And every time we get our what's into a war, it's because we've decided we want to become pacifists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, seems like every time we do it, it enhances China and North Korea back in Korean War. It enhanced Nazi Germany. It just tells these people, aha, weakness, time to attack.
Yeah.
And every time we've ever maintained strong military,
Mm-hmm.
that could be that people were just scared of. Iran, they stayed in check. Russia stayed in check. China stayed in check.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden we've done it. We just keep repeating the same thing over and over, which I find insane about this world. Is that I don't think we have to be at war, but you got to show such strength that everybody behaves.
So that viewpoint, Ken, thank you for explaining that, is probably, and maybe I'm going out on a limb, but that is probably the Southern Baptist unofficial doctrine, right? Is yes, we don't want war, but the only way to prevent war is to have more power than everybody else, right? Or sometimes called the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, right? And unofficially, right? Officially, I don't think you're going to hear the Southern Baptists say that. Unofficially, Southern Baptists are very pragmatic, okay? So we're not, we don't deal in the ideals, right? We deal with the reality. Broad strokes, right? Broad strokes here, right? So when we're talking about these issues of peace and war, you'll notice it says, do all in our power to put an end to war. So when we look at World War II, right? We're in the war. Germany has surrendered. We're coming into Japan, a very fierce nation, right? And you've got to make the call, right? Okay, we've got to end this war. Japan hasn't surrendered yet. They've got millions of people willing to fight to the death, right? We're going to send our boys in to invade the homeland, and, they've done the math, and it's going to be 10 million dead, right? Or we've got these two new bombs, right? And we're going to drop them, and we're just going to show such incredible force, right? Like a force the world's never seen. We're going to kill 500,000 people, right? And then it becomes a math problem. unfortunately. Now, that said, we've got some issues with the fire bombings of Tokyo, which, actually killed more people than the nukes. But you can see where this comes down to, right? If we're already in it, it's a bad situation. Peace ain't gonna work. We've got to end this now. And then to maintain that peace, then we have the Cold War, right? We're building up nukes, right? We got more nukes to annihilate the planet, right, than is probably sane.
But
Okay.
we've lost the respect of a lot of nations
Well,
because we've been,
going through history,
Yeah.
right? Going through history.
no, I mean now.
Nowadays, right, this is where the Southern Baptists, right, are in the midst of this. This is why they sent that letter, is because unofficial Southern Baptist doctrine is, right, we need to give overwhelming support to the side that we support to make sure, to give overwhelming power to maintain peace. Because if Ukraine had, all these weapons and stuff, Russia wouldn't have invaded in the first place. But now that we're here, the thought is, well, we need to give them overwhelming arms. And this is the same reason, like, if you look at the United States spending, right, as a percentage, right, the vast majority of that spending is military. We spend more on the military than probably the whole world combined. Why is that? That thought process. That exact thought process. Overwhelming power. That's how we keep the peace, let's say. Now, we officially we don't support war. We don't like war. We wish there were no war, right? And I think you'll ask any Southern Baptist, would you rather have war or not war? Right? Of course they'll choose peace.
You ask anybody.
Yeah.
they'll tell you that.
Well, there's some crazy people out there, right? But, most people would say, yeah, we prefer peace.
It's not so much a war as shedding the blood of innocent people, which is gonna happen. The good are gonna be gone with the bad.
Well, and
Part of it.
so,
And all of us would rather see the bad.
and that brings up the other point. Hey, Kenny. That brings up the other point. Okay, what kind of war are we willing to fight? And this brings up, Carol brought it out, right? This idea of a just war. Now, Carol may not have realized that this theory goes all the way back to like Augustine, right? This just war theory. What makes a war worth getting into? Okay, that's the first problem. What makes a war getting into? And then what makes a war? How do you fight that war? Okay, now that you're into it. And so theologians through the ages, Augustine, different people, even Spurgeon had thoughts on this, right? All the way up, even to now, right? What makes a war just? Well, Catholics actually have a doctrine on this. There's an actual Catholic doctrine of what makes a just war. And, I know we don't agree with Catholics, but I can appreciate they have a doctrine on just about everything. And so, we can use that as at least a starting point. And so the first thought is it's an actual, the war is proclaimed by a, let's say, rightfully elected leadership. So in our case, right, we have a president, we have a Congress, right? A war has to be declared by Congress, right? That's how it works, right? And because Congress is representative of us, right, that's how that works. That's the best we're going to get here. In other countries, right, it would be declared by the king. It can't be declared by like a rogue third party or some type of, coup, right, starting up. It has to be rightfully declared. It has to be for an overwhelmingly moral reason. For example, invasion would be, in this case, an acceptable reason to declare war. Invading a country to gain their resources would not be an appropriate reason to declare war.
My weeks go through a lot, man. I just dealt with a Catholic on this business.
Okay. Well, see,
He's
They should come here.
And he's Mexican, and his belief is nothing should have to die.
okay.
You should try to release it and give it its freedom, even if the mouse is in your house.
Yeah.
Take the mouse outside.
Okay.
I said, ooh, and he make more come back.
Well,
Oh boy.
but
See,
that
this is, and when I killed a hornet this week, a big black hornet about that long flying around me,
mhm.
oh, I got rid of it. He
Yeah.
said, you didn't have to kill it. I said, he'd come back.
There are what we're looking at is different
With his
viewpoints.
brother.
Okay? Because Chairman Mao in China also wanted to get rid of pests.
Yeah, okay.
And he did by the millions.
Yeah.
And when he got rid of the swallows and stuff, then they had huge locust plagues because there weren't swallows to eat them. So there are unintended consequences of our actions. Back to just war. When we're fighting, how much do we fight? For example, if, let's say, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Let's say Canada comes down. Canada, they come down and they invade Minnesota, let's say. I'm just making stuff up. But they invade Minnesota. And it's peaceful. All they do is they take captives. Like, actually, they don't even fire a gunshot, let's say. But they come down, they claim that territory for themselves. Would it be an appropriate response to nuke all of Canada back into the Stone Age?
No.
I'd say they can have Minnesota.
Okay.
Right. Well, look.
Well, we just defined that it's okay to declare war because they invaded us. Now what we're saying is actually the response actually has to be in proportion to the actual crime committed to us. So it would not be appropriate for us to nuke all of Canada for this, let's say, peaceful protest kind of thing. Wherever in World War II, right, where the enemy is wholesale bombing cities away, we can provide more force to stop that from happening. At the same time, we realize more force means more potential for innocent lives to be lost. And you'll see all these targeted raids and stuff. The reason of that is the consequences of just war theory. We're okay targeting military targets, but we don't want to bomb children's hospitals. And so you've obviously seen the news where Hamas has taken that into consideration. And so they put their headquarters, what? At the bottom of hospitals.
You know, there's a
Now,
thing
wait a
in
minute.
public safety called the forced continuation. I just had the name a minute ago and I just lost it. But anyway, it basically says it is okay to only use the force necessary to overcome the situation that you were in.
Yes. And that would be in accordance with this just war theory that's been developed. Now, there's different variations of just war theory, right? You can look at different viewpoints. But I'm kind of giving you the broad strokes here.
Let me get back to something this week with the guy with the don't kill him.
Okay.
He told me about, he was talking about even a spider has the right to live.
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I said, man, you're looking at a guy done been bit by 5 spiders, 5 different spiders, and all of them had different effects on me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna let one live in my house. I've lived through this, man. That spider, if I see him, he's gone. Now, it's the tolerance thing that people won't deal with.
Okay.
It's tolerance. We're supposed to be tolerant Christians. But when it comes to something, a woman will stand up and fight, or a man will stand up and fight for their child, or anyone in their respect, before they allow them to get hurt.
Okay.
That's in a war. You're going to look after the ones you love, and God's going to look after us because He loves us. If we love Him, even if we don't love Him, He still loves us. You're going to have wars coming in and out, man. If you don't stand up for what you're right and what you believe in, you don't need to be standing for nothing.
But there are things in this whole conversation,
That whole
we've talked
conversation
about
is fighting with people
things worth fighting for
or
and
worth
things
fighting for.
not.
That's where it comes into the, well, you obviously, what do we believe in that we believe is worth sanctity of life? Because a lot of third world countries do not believe in the sanctity of life.
Yeah. But
They die.
is it our, according to this, is it worth going to war for? Because let's remember,
We don't have one here in the
who's
United
the author of
States,
war?
because the things that were not straightened out in the past is going to repeat itself.
Let me ask you this: if Christ
Yeah.
is the Prince of Peace,
He was one man, and they said if they eliminated him, all would be fine. Nobody would.
well, Brian, no, answer the question. If Christ is the Prince of Peace,
Yeah.
then what does that make the spirit of war? Who would be the author of the spirit of war?
That would be the opposite.
Satan.
Evil,
Evil.
Evil, Satan.
Right.
Satan.
Even Satan.
Yeah. So
but
we
you
need to be
are-
careful, right? And I think
Yeah.
the Southern Baptist viewpoint is there are very extreme circumstances where war may be justified.
Right.
Should it be at the very bottom of the list? Absolutely. Right? We should definitely try to avoid war at whatever cost, diplomacy, whatever. But at the end of the day, if there is a war, right, and we've exhausted all other options, it could be justified. That's the Southern Baptist position. Even if it is justified, there is a way to fight, right, in a just manner. We want to avoid all civilian casualties if possible. At least definitely, right, minimize, right? That's why why do we spend so much money on all these laser-guided, GPS-guided precision bombs when we could just load up a B-52 and just because just war, right?
Right.
We don't want to. The enemy is the enemy. There's a lot of innocence, and it's really almost a manifestation of, you know, treat your neighbor as yourself, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Because you wouldn't want anybody bombing your kids to the smithereens because they're innocent. So you can see how this has affected history, right? But especially United States policy, right? Because by and large, this theory of just war, you know, outside of the pacifist circles, has been in the United States since the beginning, right? So our founding fathers were aware of this, right? And it's been kind of silently ingrained all the way to today, right? That's why we don't care. Now, there's some interesting lessons from World War II, right? Because the United States was also involved in total war, right? And we can take some lessons from that of what not to do, honestly. But at the same time, right, we look at the extremities of World War II, and it was an extreme war. So all that to say is this is a very divisive topic, right? These last three are probably the most divisive inside Southern Baptist circles, because some churches will lean, right? It's not like you're either pacifist or you're this. There's a whole spectrum here, right? And what I am suggesting the Southern Baptist policy is of loosely following the Southern Baptist faith and message. It's a little more loose, right? How loose is loose? I don't know. Should we go out proclaiming for war? No. But at the same time, when you read through these verses, although I am going to talk about Luke, these verses, there is a verse that talks about the government ordained by God, the civil government ordained by God, carries the sword. And that is, the civil government is ordained by God to divvy out punishment. And that would include war, I think. So it does have that responsibility. And in this country, we are all, you know, feed into that government process. So there it is. We just need to be careful with that responsibility and understand that anytime we go to war, we have to be extra careful that we're not doing it just for our sakes or what we want or because we don't like the other guy. You cannot like other guys all the time and not go to war, right? War should be the last thing on our list.
When you're looking at military or anything like that, even law enforcement, 9/10 of the law is seeing them. 9/10 of seeing strength lets you back off.
Well, you're right there with Ken.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with him. I mean, on this, because if you see
The best
big
defense
guy,
is a good
you're
offense.
gonna run up against
Something like that.
somebody twice your size and say, "I'm gonna knock you off your feet," and okay, I'm
Yeah,
not bad, I'm
yeah.
not-
But
That's a little bit of
at the same time, power corrupts.
But there's also all
Yeah.
of us.
Right? We got to be careful.
Yeah, we got to be careful, but see, there's also words I have to remind people all the time. When it comes up to a lot of stuff and it does not make sense,
Mhm.
the famous words of Barney Fife is nip it in the bud. He tells Andy that.
I
all
don't
the
know if
time.
Barney Fife would be the one I go to for military strategy.
Now, he always said, nip it, nip it, nip it.
Well, see,
He also was forced to carry his bullet in his pocket.
here,
Yeah.
the statement on what you just said is that when you look in history, the politicians that seem to be true Christians, we don't know that for sure because
Yeah.
we don't know their heart. But
Yeah.
in appearance, whoever their name was, whatever their party was,
Mhm.
the ones that appeared to be Christians seem to have a different approach. Eisenhower warned Kennedy in 1960, be careful of what's going on in this country with the military complex.
Yep. Yep.
Because that military complex wants nothing more than to spend money on weapons that they can go test in countries.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I'm sorry, you can look at it right now and you can see all we did, in my opinion, in some of these countries in recent times.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to test. Ukraine's a good example. We're just testing out our military equipment. We want to see how it works.
I've got my theories. Right? And I'm keeping my opinions out of it. But if you want to look at probably an example of the best modern just war in actual execution, you probably go back to Schwarzkopf during Desert Storm, right? Because he made it very clear, we're going to go up to the line of Iraq and we're not going to cross it, right? We didn't take over that country, whatever. Now, that is, you'll have to go and study that on your own, right? That's some worth reading. But look at his. I think he was probably the best modern example. But then again, right, Schwarzkopf wasn't in some of these other situations. Like, what would he have done during World War II? Who knows, right? Because it was an extreme circumstance. You had MacArthur, and he was willing to do to Japan, great, but he also had to be pulled off because he was about to bomb, Korea and Vietnam too. So there's a lot, like, it's not a simple, here's right and here's wrong, right? Because we live in a sin-cursed world. The whole point of this, I think, is to give us some guidance, right? War should be at the end. There's going to be different viewpoints on where that is. We should deal with each other in love and as much unity as we can in grace. But we should all be realized, like, war should be the last thing we should do. Now, I want to get to this. You can look up these verses. And all they're going to say is, blessed be the peacemakers, right? We should love your neighbor as yourself, turn the other cheek. This is where I really disagree with Southern Baptists. Luke 22:36. Then he said to them, but now whoever has a money bag should take it, and also a traveling bag, and whoever doesn't have a sword should sell his robe and buy one. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know why they put this with War and Peace, because this, to me, is taken grossly out of context here. If you just read this verse and you're like, oh, well, Christ is saying, like this is some kind of justification for self-defense or whatever. The context of this whole scripture. If you read above this, what Christ is doing, he's talking about, this is like his final discourse with his disciples. He's talking about making the prophecies from Isaiah actualize. And it talks about he'll be thrown in with the transgressors, and he's going to be a rebel, right? And so he had to have these swords with him. But at the same time, notice what happened. Like, you remember the story. The guards come and get him. Peter jumps out, the brave one, and cuts off a guard's ear. And what does Jesus do? Hey, good job, man. Self-defense. A+. No. He said, put that away. And he healed the man's ear. This and the other Luke one, I think, are just...
Well, I
these are terrible. I don't think these should be here. I don't think this justifies this. I think it's. I have some frustration.
Well,
I have
TV
frustration with
does
these.
the same thing. They'll give you a snippet of something
Yeah.
and not let you see the before and the after.
Right.
It's the same thing.
I think
you
they-
got to read the before and after to understand.
I think they put this here because they wanted some balance. Because every other verse here is talking about peace, right, and how we should want peace. And I think they wanted some. I do not agree with these two statements because they are out of context completely. So that said, when we're talking about all this theory of just war and all this, are we just making that up because we're men, or did God actually ordain that?
Well, if it,
As a teacher, I'm just leading you to different paths.
now, if
You have to make that decision on your own. But all I'm saying is, as a teacher, what I'm telling you we should be doing, war should be the end.
right, but
Now, whether you want to be pacifist or not, that's totally up to you.
In the process, they say we're gonna see it in the future, but if anybody here has seen the ear cut off, somebody put it back on, it's gonna short circuit something in the brain and gonna make them think, because whoever puts an ear back on, that's gonna give them a, what else? What else could this guy do to stop anything
You
that
know
you got
what?
coming to him?
I'm just gonna say
I
this
would
one
agree.
thing about the ear.
Whoa,
Okay.
it's a good thing,
Oh, hot take coming.
but if it happens,
I'm gonna say one thing about the ear.
Okay.
right,
I think Jesus, I believe in all my heart, that he repaired the soldier's ear for Peter's protection.
right.
That's it.
That was
Okay.
protection like a mother, your father.
I
your
just
child.
think it was for
That's
Peter's protection because Peter could have been taken away and whatever.
Yeah.
So since it was healed,
Oh,
he
ain't
didn't
interesting.
deserve any punishment.
I don't want to keep talking about
I know, but that's what I'm saying.
You're chasing a rabbit.
you're-
Okay.
It's
Are there-
all into the fact if something happens and something, little something just triggers it.
Well,
Most people are in shock.
well, peace and war is just an extension
Right.
of laws and liberties, what we would consider civil laws, right?
Uh,
I mean, it's just the extension of that, right?
in
So,
our-
yeah, little
in
things
our
can trigger big
society
things.
now, we have people that get out and just shoot weapons, so they see they can hit the target and see what that weapon will do. The damage is kind of what it gets through putting a bullet through something. They just
What's your
wanna
point,
see
caller?
That is what I'm saying. It's so freaked out. Why do you have to keep doing it when you know? It's like me running into a barbed
Are
wire
you
fence one
infringing
time.
on my right of target practice? Wow.
I'm not. It's like I said, target practice is something to keep
Hey,
people up in stock.
Hey,
Hey,
Okay.
hey,
But-
this is Bible study.
I mean, but in reality, like I said, when I ran into a barbed wire fence one time and had a hard time getting out, the first thing that calmed me down when the man looked at me and said, "Didn't you know it was there?"
Mm.
uh-huh.
All right.
Well, if you really want to know
So-
war, watch your son head off to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. You're looking at
We've
your
lived that.
Well, and right, like
nervousness of it.
all those protest songs of the '60s and '70s, right? Was it "Fortunate Son"? Probably my favorite one, right? Silver spoons and all that stuff. Like, whose kids are going to war, right? I don't want my kids to go to war. War is hell, right? We don't want that. But at the same time, like, what would happen if, I don't know, Japan strike Pearl Harbor again, right? Would that, at that point, the entire country signed up for war, right? We could see that as being justified. 9/11, right? We could see a response being justified. Vietnam, Korea, Desert Storm, that was a, what they call coalition, but because the United States is bigger than all the other militaries of the world, it's basically a United States-led war. So,
That was
the military, what?
but
Wars used to be
guys.
population control. So
Okay.
as Vietnam was, if all of those soldiers were still living, look where we would be at.
and
We've done away with wars. China comes out biological with COVID. We still got population control. And
What?
we're a
That is
strategic
big.
war. We only take out a handful in each war. So there's no population control anymore.
So,
that's a
are
lot.
you supporting
Well,
major wars? Or what do you?
Sometimes the wars are ulterior
Ulterior.
motives.
motives.
Okay.
Which was a lot of Vietnam.
Okay. So without getting into conspiracy theory land, right? I think whatever the reason, God can use evil for good, right? For reasons we may never see, right? Like, who knows, right? The next Hitler could have been killed in a war, right? Which ultimately saved lives. Who knows, right? But what we're called, like, let's look at biblical text. Our Savior promoted peace over war. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on. You know, when that whole, what would Jesus do, right? I think we really need to take that to heart about war, especially because we're dealing, that's life or death situations.
That's it.
You know, and like Ken said, you want to send your kid off to war, right? Until you're willing to do that, maybe we shouldn't be, you know, supporting war to send other people's kids. You know what I mean? So,
3 weeks ago, I went to a funeral.
okay,
Guy couldn't live with himself. He had nightmares just about all the time.
okay,
Went 2 tours in Vietnam.
mm-hmm,
They finally admitted it, and the pastor stood up and said in his funeral, in February of this year, he told me in his own yard what he had problems with.
mm-hmm,
He could not sleep at night. He had mental problems. What he was having a problem with is he had to shoot a Vietnamese woman in the war. It was the first person he killed.
mm-hmm,
He pulled the trigger 3 times. The woman come out, pointed a gun at him, shot.
mm-hmm,
Tried to shoot, didn't have any bullets. They didn't know it after he had shot her. He shot 1 time in the ground, 1 time across. Finally, the 3rd shot, he got the baby.
okay,
He couldn't live with himself. He was in a war.
yeah,
He was told what to do, and he couldn't live with it.
okay,
Now, when you're in a circumstances like that, what do you do? This man, the pastor, stood up and said that he could not live with it. Could he be forgiven by God for what he did? And he asked me the same thing. And I told him, I said, you did not do that. You were told what to do. The biggest thing was he thought the sergeant beat him up for shooting the woman, and he felt like he deserved getting a punishment for shooting a woman. The sergeant beat him up because you just risked your life and everybody else is around you.
okay.
Now,
So
to the point, was he forgiven? Yes.
let's say this: could he be forgiven?
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Mhm.
But if you're going out committing war crimes,
Right.
that's a problem. That's sin too.
When I hear killing on revenge, you're
All right.
doing something else.
Well, we're gonna have to move on.
That's a
whole
rabbit.
different story,
That's
people.
another
That's
rabbit.
another
Are there
rabbit.
any other thoughts or questions on
What
this
do you
before we
do
move on?
with yourself?
We're gonna put that rabbit in a cage.
Put in the cage.
Does everybody understand what I am trying to express through the Southern Baptist? Right?
Yes.
And we all understand that there's various viewpoints on this. It's a spectrum, right? And we should have grace with each other when we're going through this. But war should be at the very end. That's what I'm trying to get. Whether or not, if you can call it justified or not, it should still be at the end of whatever list you've got in your head. Okay. Any other thoughts? I want to make sure everybody's minds are clear for this when you look it up. Okay.
God
All right.
would not have,
So-
if God would have not wanted people to protect people, he would not have raised up valid people in the Bible fountain. All these others that stood up and fought for different people, if he had not said, we need somebody for protection. He
Okay.
gave these men the strength to stand up and do what he had to do. They did not go out and do it on
Well-
a regular basis.
We can continue this conversation, right? Because my counterpoint to that would be Jesus Christ.
Jesus
Right?
Christ.
That would be my counterpoint to almost everything. What about Jesus? So, we've got a few more minutes, but I think I'm going to end it here. The next section we're going to talk about is religious liberty, which is also very interesting and also ingrained in our Constitution, by the way. So, thankfully. But we'll talk about it, and it very, again, is how much of this, if any, is man-made, how much of this should we support, and how much of this is good or bad. Again, Baptist Faith and Message is a man-made document. It's not Scripture, so it could have error in it. And we're going to talk about, church and state should be separate. That's what it says in the document. We'll talk about that. Because here's a hint. I don't see that in heaven. And I don't see that in Israel. So we'll talk about that. is that the way it should be? So, with that, that's just food for thought. Y'all come back next week, and we'll try to wrap it up if we can.
One last thought on this is
Yep.
that the way I look at all this stuff that goes on, and is that it's up to us to understand God's message.
Right.
He allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a reason behind it.
You did?
You know, we went to Afghanistan for some reason. We did the Iraq thing for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to us to look at it and try to decipher why.
Yeah.
And what lesson are we trying to be taught?
I think that's a good point, right? Especially when Russia did it for us,
Yep.
right? And we have to be considerate of that. All right, with that, we'll close. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Father, thank you for this opportunity for us to come together and discuss these real life matters that have real impact to real families, to real Christians and non-believers all across the world. Father, I pray that you'll give us guidance, peace, and wisdom as we discuss these very, contentious topics. And I pray that you'll give us grace to deal with one another as we, find our disagreements, but ultimately look together to you for ultimate unity and strength. Father, I pray that as we go out into this world, that you'll give us the wisdom and guidance from this lesson and the other lessons that we've learned from your word to make us a light unto the world, to guide people to you. Father, keep us safe until we return next week. In Jesus' name I ask. Amen.